I want to pivot a little bit to talk about something. You made a video a while ago. I thought it was a great video. I don't know how long ago you made it, though. It was all about kind of appetite suppression tricks that bodybuilders use. And I think the purpose of the video is, hey, for those of you, most of you who are not bodybuilders watching this, who still want to shed a few lbs, these are some kind of tricks that can be used, dietary tricks. So do you remember some of that list?
Yeah, and I do want to preface when I say this that when bodybuilders are trying to get very lean, it gets to a point where you're pulling out all the stops to an extent whereby it's not necessarily reflective of what is the optimal healthy diet. Sometimes it's to the extent of, short of any attempt at micronutrient density, how do I hit my protein and satiate myself to the maximum extent and fuel my training with enough carbs and have enough fat that I don't have hormone suppression? And that's like, those are the metrics once you get to the end of a dieting phase. Now, that's not necessarily indicative of what everyone's going to do, because most people just want to see, you know, a hint of abs for the first time. So, you know, you don't need to take this to the extreme.
Yeah, I mean, I interpreted your video as this is the full suite of things you have.
Sure.
You wouldn't do all of them simultaneously. You kind of pick and choose from this list with what works. But
correct. Yeah, I guess I just definitely want to make sure, because people watching your stuff know what high quality food is, and I do not necessarily advocate for these in all circumstances, but like diet soda, quite useful for calorie restriction, in my opinion, for maintaining some, you know, satisfied sweet tooth. I think Lane has published a really good video recently highlighting that even compared to water, I'm not suggesting replace it with water, but in a state of calorie deficiency, if you have a craving, you're probably better off drinking a diet soda than you are eating some, you know, calorie rich, fat laden sugar bomb dessert. Like even some of the keto treats that you see that are marketed as, you know, healthy and, you know, diet conducive, oftentimes, like, look at the nutrition facts, you'll note the calorie component is horrendous. So just because the sugar content might be low,
right,
the fat content proportionally to make it taste good is like far more destructive to your actual body composition goals. So that is something of note as well. Some of the first things I do typically that are low hanging fruit are try to maintain the same volume of food on my plate, but just replaced with more calorie light options. So as much as I love the micronutrient density of red meat, and it is one of my go-tos, I will consider swapping some of it to chicken breast, for example. Not necessarily saying to do that long-term, but it is certainly an easy way to maintain if I'm having a 6-ounce portion of meat in a meal to hit my protein needs, having a, you know, lean chicken breast as opposed to my, you know, ground beef that I had at the grocery store. The difference in calorie to protein content is pretty significant. So that's one of the first low-hanging fruit things I do, is see how can I replace what to me perceivably is the same amount of food, but just with lighter options. So that will be going from, you know, a fat-filled Greek yogurt to maybe a more fat-free Greek yogurt. And it doesn't taste exactly the same as you remember it, but it's pretty damn close, and the calories are perhaps, you know, a fraction as much, and you're still getting proportionally the protein you need. Swapping some red meats to whites. Eggs, going from some eggs with egg yolks. If you sprinkle in some egg whites with it, as opposed to just all whole eggs, you can still get yolks in and get your micronutrients, but it almost tastes indiscernibly different when you have just maybe like 1 or 2 of them replaced with egg whites as opposed to the whole egg. Like there are little things that are just noticeable, but not enough for you to consider it, oh my God, I'm in a deep deficit right now and it's like I'm starving. You almost don't notice. And that in itself, just even 3 things I mentioned, you probably could have chopped off 500, 600 calories from
that much.
Yeah, an egg is 80 calories per large egg, I believe. Could be even higher depending on how large it is. And then an egg white for the proportional amount of protein, I think, is like 30 off the top of my head. Could be wrong on that, but something like that. You know, chicken breast, I think it's like 30 calories per cooked ounce, depending on, you know.
This is why I like wild game, because you're still getting red meat, but it's super lean.
Yeah, this is one thing I was going to ask you on our podcast for my channel too. Is like, you pound these venison sticks that are so lean and great. Like, how would you, as a budget-friendly person, go about getting your protein with the most lean cuts? Because it's not always the most, like, you know, it's pretty cost prohibitive to get the really good bison, venison, stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, one option is, if you want red meat and you want to build it, I think you go hunting, right? Like, if you think about it, like if you shoot one large deer, one, you know, elk, that's going to feed your family for more than a year.
See, this is unconventional advice, but that is like actually practically applicable advice for what is budget friendly.
Yeah. And by the way, like, if you know, people would say, oh my God, like, how do you shoot an elk? I mean, you know, it's impossible to get elk tags to shoot big elk. Well, guess what? It can be a cow elk, like a cow elk, a female elk. Like, those tags are over the counter. Anybody can get them. These are not, you know, you're not trophy hunting. So nobody, like, there's no, you go, states regulate how much you can hunt. You get incredible meat from the cow. I would argue that's the healthiest thing you could eat, frankly, is wild game, because these animals are completely unstressed. So anyway, I think those are options if you're sort of doing it on a budget, because you know, the amount of meat you would get out of a cow would more than feed you and your family for a year.
What would you think? I don't even know if this is the right question to ask, but because I've never hunted, so I don't know what this looks like as far as, you know, the cost to get your what you need to hunt with, whatever licensing you need.
Yeah.
How many states this is viable in, and then also skill level. Like, does it take a long time to even get to a point where you could successfully achieve?
It depends. If the big divide is if you wanted to bow hunt versus rifle hunt. It's much quicker to get there with a rifle than a bow.
Okay.
But also, I truly believe rifle hunting is more humane. A person who's a really good shot, and believe me, it doesn't take that long to become a really good shot with a rifle. You know, you would be able to shoot an animal within, you know, inside 300 yards or 400 yards, and the animal would die immediately. So there's no suffering involved. That would not be a terribly expensive proposition. Now, maybe the first year it is, but remember, you amortize the cost of your learning and, you know, buying a gun and things like that out over the cost. But I mean, I'd have to sit down and do the calculation, but I think that would be less expensive than if you were, you know, spending that much money on meat, for sure, because you're going to get thousands of dollars worth of meat from that.
Definitely sounds better than what I used to do, which was buy really shitty frozen chicken in boxes at Superstore. So
yeah, I think I've said, I'm sure I said this before on podcast, but the more I've, you know, eaten, you know, and migrated my diet more and more towards wild game, the less I can really tolerate. I mean, I can't eat anything that's farmed. Like even chicken is just so nauseating to me in general. But anyway, you know, it's just everyone's palate is somewhat different.
Yeah, that's one of the problems with getting exposed to better food too, is you develop this refined palate where the stuff you used to get away with that was super budget friendly and you lived on, you thought was fine, now tastes like horrendous. But anyway, aside, yeah, some of the things, like, I think the meat discussion is definitely useful. Like, I hadn't even thought of that, so that's worthwhile to note.